It's harmattan season in Ghana, West Africa. Red dust blows south from the Sahara Desert, and fine grit covers every surface. We're following women candidates on the campaign trail in a project to increase rural women's voice in politics. There are many smart, accomplished activists in far northern areas of Ghana, including my new friends, activist educator Helen Korantang and nurse private clinic owner Fabiana Kava-Arpo. Fabiana was a candidate in Ghana's 2010 District Assembly elections in Upper West Region. Women at all levels of decision-making is vital to advance women's rights. Activists in Ghana are working for 50-50 representation of women in government. It's important to increase rural women's role in politics. Strengthening women's voices and financial autonomy is one way to fight back against lack of education, domestic abuse, cruel cultural and traditional practices, and the slow-motion violence of poverty. African countries have struggled with fair election process since their independence around 1950. Colonial powers like Britain, France, Portugal, and Germany ignored 1,000 tribal boundaries marking indigenous lands and instead superimposed artificially drawn countries, boundaries that served European interests, that carved up Africa like a cake. Today, competing tribal groups in Africa still struggle to unite under a common flag in their respective countries. This drawing from the Caribbean country of Curacao shows hundreds of tribal group territories in Africa were overwritten by European colonialists. Modern countries in Africa were created with the stroke of a foreign pen. Now Western societies point to continuing political unrest in Africa and say the situation will never improve. Others think the future of Africa, its hope, lies with its remarkable women. Meeting some of these women leaders in Ghana, working together on empowerment projects, and becoming friends with a few will stay with me forever. Despite the fact Ghana is a multi-party democracy, perhaps the most peaceful country in Africa, women still have a long way to go. Just 10% of 6,000 elected officials in Ghana are women. Education and empowerment are part of the United Nations Millennium Goals for Women. Teaching women to vote, getting them elected, and trained in politics. All these give women a stronger voice in society. One remarkable activist in northern Ghana is Helen Korantang from the Center for Rural Women's Empowerment. Helen partnered with ABANTU for Development in Ghana's Upper West Region to educate women in politics about making their voices heard. We followed Helen as she visited villages of Wala people, Muslims who live around the northern city of Wa. Locals gathered under each village's meeting tree as Helen explained the importance of women exercising their choice by voting.
To tell assembly voting, to tell them, you know, committee, Nasanga, Kapo, Nambaya, cover feel our forms, a bunch of fail on it. To know you in a nearby each other to fail on. To buy each other to fail or Kayandi and Jumania for Hanela. Nasanga, other Bungan watcher, chat in a vote. No, you're going to thank you. Young Bagati in a Renka be about a committee. There you live one. I'll assemble my.
So far, so good. They have 61 women voting as of now, and with 80 men, and 85 men also have cast their votes. And we asked whether all the materials are intact. They said yes, I said 2 empty.
Teams trained women how to mark ballots with a thumbprint and to wipe leftover ink on their hair. Election day, Helen was responsible for checking observers at 31 polling stations. Election observers oversaw the voting process, ensured there were enough ballots, and recorded the number of women lined up to vote. Ghana's district elections meant victory for women in Upper West Region. 30% of candidates supported by ABANTU and partners were elected. Collaboration between ABANTU for Development, Canadian Crossroads, and YWCA Canada meant candidates were trained in political process and received bicycles to reach potential voters in remote villages. First-time election candidate Mamuna Mahama Yahaya did not win her seat, but the junior high school teacher says she will run again in the next election. Meanwhile, Mamuna's helping village women with small businesses in shea butter and soap making. Shea nut butter is edible, used in cooking and cosmetics. 3 of the 10 candidates who received bicycles were elected. Women told me they didn't ride bicycles themselves. Their long skirts and fitted blouses were far too tight, but young male campaign team workers did. Money and property are denied to women in many countries. United Nations reports say of all the deeded property in the world, women own less than 1%. Newly elected Fabiana Keva-Arpo is one West African woman trying to change those odds. We followed her to 5 remote villages in her electoral area in the Upper West region of Ghana. Supporting women at all levels of decision-making will advance women's rights. Elections let historically disadvantaged groups like rural women be part of Ghana's national political scene. Rural priorities are new water wells and funding for small loans for women in business. Female farm workers need money for donkeys and carts, cutlasses, hoes, and fertilizer. By now, we have heard the UN studies that when men get aid money, they spend it on themselves, alcohol, weapons, prostitutes, or second wives. When women get money, they feed and educate their families. This strengthens local communities. When women entrepreneurs get support, their families are less desperate. They can eat. This increases the number of girls in school. Clean drinking water and education are needed. Children walk 5 kilometers to school, and when it rains, they are cut off by flooded rivers near the village. School teachers are so low paid, they flee rural areas into cities, so country children get even less education. Strengthening women's financial autonomy is one way to end poverty and the traditional cultural practices that marginalize women. Activists in organizations like ABANTU for Development and its international partners, Canadian Crossroads and YWCA Canada, are part of bringing this change to Ghana. Fabiana traveled 14 hours by bus to the coast city of Accra to say goodbye, just before I went home to Canada. She brought souvenir gifts, a hand-woven shawl, and her hopes for women in Upper West. Leaving hot African sun behind, I returned to Vancouver in spring. From Mount Seymour, I emailed Fabiana's poster along with memories of our connection, mirroring each other's journeys to empowerment. We need each other to learn, to create better lives for women and communities all over the world.